The medical scanner hummed its third cycle while Daniel Reed sat perfectly still on the examination table. His shirt hung on a hook behind him, and the cool air of the trade station's medical bay raised goosebumps on his skin. He watched the alien technician's face change from bored routine to puzzled concern. Vree tapped the screen with one of his 4 fingers, then tapped it again. The Halon species weren't known for showing much emotion, but Daniel caught the slight widening of his large eyes. Something was wrong with the scans. "Is there a problem?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice casual. "Please remain still. I need to recalibrate." Vree didn't look at him when he spoke. Daniel knew there was nothing wrong with the machine. He'd been through this before, twice, at other stations across the settled systems. He should have expected it would happen again. The scans never lied. The first scanner had mapped his cellular structure. The second had examined his skeleton. The third had traced the pathways of his nervous system. Together, they painted a picture that didn't match the simple identity papers he'd submitted with his commercial shipping license application. Vree moved to the communications panel and spoke in quick, clipped sentences. Within minutes, another Halon entered the medical bay. This one was older, with gray patches on the ridge above his eyes. His badge identified him as Prex, Senior Medical Supervisor. "Run them again," Prex said, studying the screens. "I've run them 3 times already." "Then run them a 4th. The scanner cycled again. Daniel remained motionless, staring at a spot on the opposite wall. He'd learned that staying calm helped. Any sign of nervousness made things worse. Prex enlarged the cellular scan on the main display. These scarring patterns, radiation burns, chemical exposure, thermal damage. But they're old. Fully healed. The skeletal scan shows 14 major fractures. Vree added. Ribs, left femur, both arms, vertebrae. All healed. Most set without proper medical intervention. And the neurological mapping. Prex pulled up the 3rd scan. He went very quiet. Daniel watched them study the evidence written in his body. Every scar had a story. Every heel break was a memory he'd rather forget. The scan showed what he'd survived, but they couldn't show why. "This trauma distribution," Prex said slowly, "it's not from any single event. This is years of sustained damage. Could it be a mining accident survivor?" Vree suggested. "No. Look at the radiation signature. This is nuclear fallout exposure. Extended, not acute." Daniel cleared his throat. "Can I put my shirt back on? I'm getting cold." Both Halons turned to look at him, as if they'd forgotten he was there. "Not yet," Prex said. "We need to cross-reference these patterns with our medical database." His fingers danced across the console, entering search parameters. The system thought for a moment, then returned no matches. "Try historical archives," Vree said quietly. Prex hesitated, then expanded his search. The computer took longer this time, digging through centuries of medical records from thousands of worlds. When it finally produced a result, both Halons went completely still. Daniel didn't need to see the screen to know what they'd found. "Earth," Prex whispered. "Nuclear winter event. Extinction-level catastrophe. 247 years ago." He turned to Daniel. "The records say there were no survivors." "The records are wrong," Daniel said simply. A security officer appeared in the doorway, summoned by some silent, alert Daniel hadn't noticed. The Dromex species were built like walking boulders, and this one filled the entrance completely. His name tag read Bront. "What's the situation?" Bront's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "We have a discrepancy," Prex said carefully. "This human's medical scans match injury patterns from Earth's extinction event, but that's impossible. He claims to be from Proxima Colony, born 83 years after Earth fell." Bront moved closer, studying Daniel with small, dark eyes. "Your papers say you're 32 years old." "That's correct." "So you're claiming to be 264 years old?" "No." Daniel met the security officer's gaze. "I'm claiming to be 32. I was 17 when the missiles launched. I spent 6 years in a bunker complex in what used to be Colorado. Then I left." "Left how?" Prex asked. "All evacuation ships departed before the bombardment. The records are very clear. I built an escape pod from scraps and launched toward the nearest colony signal I could detect." Daniel's voice remained flat, factual. "Took me 7 months to reach Proxima. I've been working and moving through the colonies ever since. Vri pulled up another screen. Cryo-sleep records from that period show no Earth refugees arriving at Proxima. I didn't go through official channels. I was in a homemade pod with barely functional life support. I landed in a salvage yard, patched myself up, and started over. Bront crossed his massive arms. That's quite a story. It's the truth. The scans prove it. Prex was still studying the medical data. These injury patterns, they're consistent with bunker life during atmospheric collapse. Radiation seepage, structural failures, malnutrition, untreated trauma. He looked at Daniel with something like awe. You survived 6 years in those conditions? 43 other people didn't, Daniel said quietly. I was just the last one left. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of medical equipment. Vri and Prex exchanged glances. Bront shifted his weight, uncertain how to proceed. So, Daniel said into the silence, does this mean I'm not getting my shipping license? 3 screens dominated the wall of the conference room where they'd moved Daniel. Each one displayed a different piece of Earth's final days. Launch trajectories of missiles. Atmospheric composition charts showing the rapid collapse. Population density maps that went dark sector by sector. Daniel stared at his hands while Station Administrator Sela read through the historical files. She was Vereen, with silver skin that shifted colors based on her mood. Right now, she was showing deep blue, which Daniel had learned meant concern or confusion. The last transmission from Earth was 247 years ago, Sela said. It came from a military bunker in the Northern Hemisphere. The message was simple. Atmospheric collapse imminent. No rescue possible. This is humanity's last broadcast. I remember that day, Daniel said. I was in Bunker 772. We picked up the transmission on our emergency radio. Everyone went quiet. We all knew what it meant. Prex sat across from him, tablet in hand. How many people were in your bunker? 51 when the doors sealed. 43 by the time I left. What happened to them? Daniel took a breath. Year 1, we lost 6 to radiation sickness. The bunker shielding had microfractures we didn't know about. Year 2, the water recycling system failed. We lost 9 before I managed to fix it, but the damage was done. Contamination. Bront stood by the door listening. And the rest. Year 3, structural collapse in the East Wing. Killed 5 instantly, wounded 8 more. We didn't have proper medical supplies. 3 of the wounded died over the next month. Year 4, food shortage led to fights. 2 dead. Year 5, disease outbreak. Something in the air filtration. 12 gone in 6 weeks. Daniel's voice never changed tone. He'd told this story before, to himself, in the dark. Year 6, the remaining survivors decided to try reaching the surface. The radiation had dropped to survivable levels according to our instruments. They didn't make it past the first airlock. Equipment failure. But you survived, Sela said softly. I was in a machine shop when they opened the airlock. By the time I got there, everyone was dead. After that, I was alone. Prex made notes on his tablet. How did you manage 6 more months alone? The bunker systems were failing one by one. I knew I had maybe a year before everything shut down completely. So I started building. Daniel finally looked up. There were 3 dead surface rovers in the garage bay. A damaged shuttle that never made it underground. Hull, plating from the bunker walls. I had tools, and I had time. You built a spacecraft, Vri said. He'd been quiet until now, but his large eyes were fixed on Daniel. From wreckage, I built something that could hold pressure and move through vacuum. Whether you want to call it a spacecraft is up to you. Sela pulled up another screen. There's no record of any unregistered vessel arriving at Proxima Colony during that period. I didn't land at the colony proper. I came down in a salvage yard on the outskirts. The pod was barely holding together. I traded it for scrap value, got enough credits for a room and some food, and disappeared into the labor pool. No one questioned a new human arriving from nowhere. Proxima was taking refugees from all over at that time. There was a mining disaster on Titan's Rest, a plague outbreak on Haven Station. People were moving constantly. One more human with basic engineering skills didn't raise any flags. Bront moved closer to the table. Why hide? You could have claimed refugee status, gotten assistance. Because I didn't want to be special, Daniel said. I didn't want to be the last survivor of Earth. I just wanted to work and sleep and not think about those 6 years. But you had to move eventually, Sela said. You said this was your third time being discovered. Proxima lasted 15 years. Then I needed a medical scan for a construction job. Same thing happened. They found the scars, ran the records, figured out who I was. Suddenly, I was giving interviews, talking to historians, answering the same questions over and over. Daniel rubbed his face. So, I moved to Kepler Station. That lasted 9 years before another medical scan. And now here, Prex said. And now here. Daniel looked at Sela. I know what comes next. You'll file a report with the Galactic Archive. They'll send researchers. The media will get wind of it. For the next year, I'll be the Earth survivor again instead of just another pilot. Sela's skin shifted to a pale green, which meant sympathy. I understand your frustration, but you have to understand our position. You're a living witness to an extinction-level event. That information is invaluable. I've already given my testimony. Twice. Then we'll make this the last time, Sela said. One comprehensive documentation session. Full medical workup, complete historical account, everything. And in exchange, I'll personally ensure your identity is buried so deep in the classified archives that no one will ever connect these scans to you again. Daniel studied her face. You can do that. I'm the station administrator. I have discretion over sensitive information. If I classify you as a protected witness, your records become sealed. What's the catch? No catch. Just cooperation. One final time, tell your story. Let's document it properly. Then you get your shipping license, and you disappear into the cargo lanes like you wanted. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Through the window, he watched a freight hauler undock and turn toward the jump gate. That could be him in a few days. Free. How long will this take, he asked. 3 days. Maybe 4. And then I'm done. Then you're done, Sela confirmed. Daniel looked at each of them in turn. Sela with her sympathetic green. Prex with his careful documentation. Vri with his scientific curiosity. Brant with his security protocols. All right, Daniel said finally. One last time, then I want to be left alone. Advanced Medical Bay 17 had equipment Daniel had never seen before. Prex explained that most of it was used for xenobiology research, but today it would map every injury Daniel had ever sustained and place it on a precise timeline. Next to him sat Tess, a Lorian historian with white fur and patient eyes. We'll start with the skeletal injuries, Prex said, adjusting the scanners. The computer will identify each fracture and you can tell us how it happened. Take your time. The first image appeared on the screen. Daniel's left femur, showing a compound fracture about 1/3 down from the hip. The bone had healed at a slight angle. Year 4, Daniel said without hesitation. Structural collapse in the east residential section. A support beam fell. Pinned my leg for 3 hours before the others could lift it off. How did you treat it? Tess asked, making notes. We had one medic in the bunker. She'd been a nurse before everything fell apart. She said it as best she could, but we didn't have proper equipment for something that severe. I was on painkillers for 2 months. Started walking again after 4. The next image showed his ribs. Multiple fractures, all on the left side. Year 5, Daniel said. Food riot. Someone decided I was hoarding supplies. I wasn't, but hungry people don't think straight. 3 of them cornered me in the storage area. One had a pipe. Did you fight back? Brant asked from his position by the door. Enough to get away, but not before the damage was done. Image after image appeared. Each bone told a story. His right wrist broken when a valve burst and he was thrown backward. His collarbone cracked during another structural collapse. 2 fingers on his left hand fractured when a tool slipped while he was repairing the water system under pressure. Then they moved to the cellular scans. The radiation damage was extensive but healed, forming patterns across his entire body like an invisible map. This scarring pattern, Prex said, highlighting Daniel's back and shoulders, indicates direct exposure to radioactive material. But the levels suggest it was chronic, not acute. Reactor coolant leak in year 2, Daniel explained. It was slow at first. By the time we realized what was happening, the contamination had spread through the ventilation system. I was the only one with enough engineering knowledge to fix it. The protective suits we had were old and degraded. I was in the reactor room for 6 hours. You were dying while you worked, Tess said quietly. We were all dying. At least this way, I was doing something useful. The chemical burns on his hands and forearms came next. Hydroponics, Daniel said before they could ask. The growing system was failing. Plants were dying. We needed fertilizer, but didn't have any. So I made some. From what? Vree asked. Whatever I could find. Cleaning chemicals, mineral deposits from the water filtration, biological waste. It wasn't safe, and I knew it. But we needed food more than I needed undamaged skin. Prex pulled up the neurological scans. The patterns were complex, showing areas of trauma throughout Daniel's brain structure. Not physical damage, but stress markers that had been written into his neural pathways. These patterns indicate sustained psychological trauma, Prex said carefully. Extended periods of extreme stress, fear response activation, trauma processing. This is consistent with PTSD, but the duration is extraordinary. Daniel was quiet. I need to ask, Tess said gently. How did you cope? 6 years of watching people die, knowing you might be next. How did you not break? Who says I didn't? The room went still, Daniel continued. There were days I couldn't get out of bed. Weeks where I just went through the motions. The only thing that kept me moving was that someone had to keep the systems running. If I stopped, everyone died faster. Was there ever a moment you considered giving up? Tess asked. Every single day. Daniel's voice was flat. But I'm stubborn. And by the time I was alone, I'd invested too much effort into surviving to quit. They worked for hours. Every scar had a date. Every injury had a story. Burns from electrical fires. Cuts from sharp metal edges. Bruises from falls in the dark when the lighting failed. The medical bay computer assembled it all into a comprehensive timeline of survival. Finally, Prex sat back. I've treated trauma victims from mining accidents, combat injuries, industrial disasters. I've never seen anything like this. The fact that you're sitting here, functional, is remarkable. Humans are hard to kill, Daniel said. It's more than that, Vree added. Your body shows evidence of healing that should have been impossible without proper medical care. You set your own broken bones. You treated your own radiation sickness. You continued functioning through injuries that would have incapacitated most species. I didn't have a choice. There was no one else. Tess looked up from her notes. That's what I find most significant. You weren't trying to be heroic. You were just solving problems. That's all survival is, Daniel said. One problem after another. Fix the reactor. Purify the water. Treat the sick. Bury the dead. Build the escape pod. Each day is just the next problem to solve. Can I ask about the escape pod construction? Tess said. The technical aspects. Daniel described it in detail. Stripping the rovers for their power cells. Cutting hull plating from the bunker walls where it wouldn't compromise structural integrity. Using the damaged shuttle's guidance computer. Calculating fuel requirements based on the remaining chemical propellants he could synthesize. The math said I had a 31% chance of reaching Proxima before my air ran out, Daniel said. But staying in the bunker was 0%. So I launched. 7 months in that pod, Prex said. Alone. That's another kind of survival entirely. It was easier than the bunker, Daniel admitted. No one was dying. No systems were failing. I just had to breathe slowly and wait. Tess asked her final question. What do you want people to know about Earth? About what happened there? Daniel thought for a long time. Outside the medical bay, the station continued its endless activity. Ships docked and departed. People from 100 worlds went about their lives. Earth was ancient history to them, a tragedy in a database. I want them to know we didn't give up, Daniel said finally. Even when the missiles launched, people were trying to save each other. The scientists were sharing data until the communications went dark. The doctors were treating patients in collapsing hospitals. The engineers were keeping the bunker systems running. We were still human, still trying, right up to the end. He paused, and I want them to know that it matters. Every person who died in those bunkers was trying to survive. They weren't statistics. They were people with names and stories, and they fought to live. I'm just the one who made it out. Tess saved her notes. Prex shut down the scanners. The documentation was complete. Thank you, Tess said. This will help more people than you know. Daniel just nodded. He was tired. The memories always made him tired. Can I go now? He asked. Yes, Silas said from the doorway. She'd been listening for the last hour. You're free to go. Your shipping license will be ready tomorrow. Daniel stood slowly and headed for the door. Behind him, the screen still showed the map of his scars. Daniel found himself in Observation Deck 12, watching cargo ships move through the docking lanes. He'd been cleared to leave the medical bay an hour ago, but hadn't made it back to his temporary quarters yet. Something about the endless movement of ships was calming the Elorian child, no more than 6 or 7 in human years, approached the viewing window next to him. She pressed her small hands against the glass and watched a massive freight hauler rotate into position. That one's really big, she said to no one in particular. Bulk carrier, Daniel said. Probably hauling or from a mining colonies. The child looked up at him. Are you a pilot? Not yet, but soon. I want to be a pilot when I grow up. She turned back to the window. My mom says I have to study really hard first. Your mom's right. Navigation isn't easy. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the ships. Then the child asked, Why do you look so sad? Daniel glanced down at her. What makes you think I'm sad? My mom gets that look sometimes, when she's remembering something that hurts. Out of the mouths of children, Daniel thought. I'm just tired, he said. Oh, the child accepted this. My name is Rin. What's yours? Daniel. That's a human name. Are you from one of the colonies? Something like that. Rin's mother appeared then, calling her away. The child waved goodbye and ran off, leaving Daniel alone with his thoughts again. His communicator buzzed. A message from Sela asking him to come to her office. Daniel sighed and headed for the administrative section. Sela's office overlooked the main concourse. Through the transparent walls, Daniel could see thousands of beings from dozens of species moving through the station, trading, traveling, living their lives. It was overwhelming sometimes, all this life. Sit, Sela said, gesturing to a chair. Her skin was showing neutral silver today. I wanted to talk to you before you left. Is there a problem with my license? No, your license is fine. This is about something else. She pulled up a display. 3 researchers from the Galactic Historical Institute have requested permission to meet with you. Daniel's jaw tightened. No, let me finish. They're not interested in you as a curiosity. They're studying survival psychology in extinction-level events. There have been 17 near-extinction events in the past century alone. 4 of them resulted in complete population loss. 13 had survivors, but the psychological aftermath destroyed their societies within a generation. What does that have to do with me? You're the only documented case of a solo survivor who integrated into a new society and remained functional for decades. They want to understand how. So, I'm a research subject. You're a potential source of information that could help other survivors. Sela leaned forward. One of these researchers is from a world that survived a pandemic extinction event. 97% of their population died. She's trying to develop support protocols for the survivors. Daniel stared at the display. It showed profiles of the 3 researchers. The Lorian woman Sela had mentioned. A Vereen male who specialized in trauma recovery. A human from one of the newer colonies who studied societal collapse. What do they want? Daniel asked finally. To talk. To understand your coping mechanisms. To learn what helped you survive, not just physically, but mentally. I don't have answers. I just kept moving forward. That in itself is an answer. Most survivors don't. They collapse inward or lash out. You integrated, worked, built a life. They want to know how. Daniel rubbed his face. This was exactly what he'd been trying to avoid. Being studied, analyzed, turned into a case file. But the researcher's face on the screen stayed in his mind. A Lorian woman who'd watched 97% of her world die. She wasn't looking at him as a curiosity. She was looking for hope. How long would this take, he asked. 2 hours. 1 meeting. They'll ask questions, you answer what you're comfortable answering. Nothing recorded, nothing published with your identity attached. Just a conversation. And if I say no, then you say no. Your license is already approved. This is completely voluntary. Daniel looked at the profiles again. The human researcher had included a note. We're not trying to exploit your trauma. We're trying to help people who are going through what you went through. Any insight you can provide could save lives. He thought about the 43 people who died in Bunker 772, about the researchers working to help survivors from other worlds, about whether his experience could actually mean something beyond his own survival. One meeting, Daniel said, 2 hours maximum, and I wanted in writing that nothing I say gets published with my name attached. Done. Sela's skin shifted to warm green. Thank you. I know this isn't easy. When? Tomorrow afternoon. They're already on station. Daniel nodded and stood to leave. One more thing, Sela said. Your testimony from earlier, the full medical documentation. Tess compiled it into a comprehensive archive. With your permission, she'd like to submit it to the Historical Preservation Database. That's what this whole thing was about, wasn't it? Yes, but your permission still matters. Daniel thought about it. His story would be there forever, locked in some database, available to researchers and historians centuries from now. It felt strange to think of his pain being academic material, but maybe that was better than it meaning nothing at all. Fine, he said, but keep my identity sealed like you promised. Maximum classification, only accessible with multi-level authorization. Daniel left the office and made his way back to his quarters. They were small but clean, with a narrow bed and a window overlooking the docking bays. He lay down and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow he'd talk to the researchers, tell them about the coping mechanisms he'd used without even realizing they were coping mechanisms, the routines that kept him sane, the small goals that gave him something to focus on, the deliberate choice to keep moving forward even when stopping would have been easier. Maybe it would help someone. Maybe it wouldn't. But at least he'd be trying. His communicator buzzed again. This time it was from Prex. Medical analysis complete. Your survival capabilities are statistically unprecedented. If you're interested, I'd like to discuss trauma recovery protocols we could develop based on your healing patterns. Daniel sent back a simple reply. Maybe after I get my first cargo run done. Prex responded immediately. Understood. The offer stands. Daniel closed his eyes. The station hummed around him, alive with activity. Tomorrow would be difficult. The day after, he'd meet with the researchers. And then, finally, he'd get his ship assignment and disappear into the cargo lanes. Just a few more days of being the survivor. Then he could go back to being just another pilot that he could do a few more days. He'd done 6 years. This was nothing, but even as he thought it, he knew something had shifted. He'd spent decades running from what had happened on Earth. Maybe it was time to stop running and let it mean something. Maybe. The meeting room was smaller than Daniel expected. Just a simple conference space with a round table and comfortable chairs. The 3 researchers were already there when he arrived. Sela made brief introductions, then left them alone. The Lorian woman introduced herself as Kessa. Her white fur was neatly groomed, and her eyes were kind. Thank you for meeting with us. I know this is difficult. The Varine male was named Orin. His skin showed deep blue, the color of careful thought. We've read your testimony from yesterday. The medical documentation. It's extraordinary. The human was younger than Daniel, maybe mid-20s. His name was Robert, and he looked nervous. I'm from Terra Nova Colony. My thesis is on societal recovery after catastrophic loss. I appreciate you giving us your time. Daniel sat down. 2 hours. That's what we agreed on. 2 hours, Kessa confirmed. We can start with whatever you're comfortable discussing. What do you want to know? Kessa glanced at her notes. Your testimony mentioned that you maintained routines even when systems were failing. Can you elaborate on that? Daniel thought back. Every morning, I'd check the air filtration, then water recycling, then power generation, then food storage. It didn't matter if nothing was wrong. I checked anyway. Why? Orin asked. Because it gave structure. When everything's falling apart, you need something predictable. The routine was the only thing I could control. Robert made notes on his tablet. Did you ever skip the routine? Once. Day after the last survivors died, trying to reach the surface. I stayed in bed for 18 hours. Then I got up and did the checks. Because if I didn't, there was no point in anything. Kessa leaned forward. That's what we're trying to understand. That moment where you chose to continue. Most survivors don't make that choice. I'm not special. I just didn't have anywhere else to be. But you were alone, Oren said. No social pressure. No one depending on you. You could have given up and no one would have known. Daniel was quiet for a moment. The bunker had a log. Everyone who'd ever been there had written in it. Their names, where they came from, what they did. I read it sometimes. 200 people had passed through that bunker over the years. Most died. Some left for the surface early and never came back. A few made it onto the evacuation ships. And Kessa prompted gently. And I wanted my entry to say something other than gave up. If someone ever found that bunker, found that log, I wanted them to know someone tried until the very end. Robert looked up from his tablet. So survival became about bearing witness. Maybe. I don't know. I just knew I wasn't ready to die yet. They talked for an hour about practical matters. How Daniel had structured his days. The small projects he'd given himself to maintain purpose. The way he'd rationed not just food but hope, allowing himself to imagine a future even when it seemed impossible. Then Kessa asked the harder question. How did you handle the isolation? 6 months, completely alone. I talked to myself a lot. Narrated what I was doing like I was teaching someone. Pretended the people who died could still hear me. It sounds crazy. It's not crazy, Oren said. It's a documented coping mechanism, creating an imagined social connection to replace lost ones. Did it help? Kessa asked. Sometimes. Other times it made things worse, because I'd remember they were really gone. Daniel looked at his hands. The worst part wasn't the fear or the hunger or the pain. It was the silence. No voices. No laughter. Just me and the machines. How did you stay sane? I'm not sure I did. Not entirely. But I stayed functional, which was close enough. Robert asked about the decision to build the escape pod. Daniel explained the calculations, the resource management, the timeline that forced his hand. But Robert kept pushing deeper. You knew it was only a 31% chance of success. Why take that risk? Because staying was 0%. At least in the pod, I was doing something. But you were safe in the bunker for maybe another year. Safe isn't the same as alive, Daniel said. I was already dying there, just slowly. The pod was a chance to actually live. Kessa made a note. That distinction matters. Many survivors struggle with understanding that survival isn't the same as living. They talked about the 7 months in the pod, the meditation techniques Daniel had developed to conserve oxygen, the way he'd mentally rehearsed his arrival over and over, the decision to land in a salvage yard rather than risk questions at the official colony port. You were planning your integration strategy even before you landed, Oren observed. I knew I couldn't be the Earth survivor. I had to be just another human looking for work. Did it work? Robert asked. For 15 years. Then I needed a medical scan and everything fell apart. But those 15 years were good. Normal. I was just a maintenance tech fixing water recyclers and power conduits. No one knew. No one cared. Do you regret being discovered? Kessa asked. Daniel considered this. Yes and no. I regret losing the anonymity. But maybe it was time. I've been carrying this alone for decades. At least now it's documented. Other people know what happened. Does that help? A little. Maybe more than a little. He paused. The kid I met yesterday on the observation deck asked why I looked sad. She said her mom gets that look when remembering painful things. I realized I've been wearing that look for decades and thinking no one could see it. The 2 hours stretched to 3, then 4. Daniel found himself talking about things he'd never told anyone. The nightmares that still woke him. The way certain sounds triggered panic responses. The difficulty forming close relationships when you've watched everyone you cared about die. But he also talked about the unexpected moments of joy. The first time he'd tasted fresh fruit after landing on Proxima. The satisfaction of fixing a complex system. The quiet pleasure of watching ships come and go. Proof that life continued. Finally, Kessa sat back. I think we have what we need. But I want to ask one final question, if you're willing. Go ahead. What advice would you give to someone who just survived something catastrophic? Someone who's alone and broken and doesn't know how to move forward. Daniel thought carefully. I'd tell them that surviving isn't the same as living, but it's a start. That routines matter more than they think. That it's okay to fall apart sometimes as long as you get up after. That hope doesn't have to be big. It just has to be something. Even if that something is just I'll survive one more day to see what happens next. He looked at each of them, and I'd tell them they're not as alone as they think. Even if no one understands exactly what they went through, there are people willing to try. That has to count for something. Kessa's eyes were bright. Thank you. This conversation will help more people than you know. I hope so, Daniel said. Otherwise, it's just more pain for nothing. They packed up their materials and prepared to leave. At the door, Robert turned back. For what it's worth, your entry in that bunker log. It didn't just say someone tried. It said someone succeeded. After they left, Daniel sat alone in the conference room for a while. Something had shifted in him during the conversation. The burden felt lighter somehow. Not gone, but shared. His communicator buzzed. Message from Sela. Your ship assignment is ready. Small freight hauler. Solo runs to frontier colonies. Exactly what you requested. Daniel smiled. Tomorrow he'd leave this station and disappear into the cargo lanes. But maybe now he wasn't running from something. Maybe he was running towards something instead. That IT was a small difference, but it mattered. The cargo ship was exactly what Daniel had requested. Small, efficient, designed for solo operation. It sat in docking bay 47, fuel cells charged and cargo hold loaded with mining equipment bound for a frontier colony. He ran through the pre-flight checklist methodically, the way he'd learned to do everything. Each system checked and double-checked. 2 weeks had passed since the meeting with the researchers. In that time, he'd received 3 messages. One from Kessa thanking him again and mentioning that his insights were already being incorporated into survivor support protocols. One from Prex with a medical journal article about trauma recovery that cited anonymous case studies Daniel recognized as his own. One from Tess saying the historical archive was complete and sealed. He'd responded to none of them. There was nothing left to say. The ship's computer announced clearance for departure. Daniel settled into the pilot's seat and felt something close to peace. This was familiar. This was simple. Point A to point B, cargo delivered, payment received. No questions about scars or survival or what it meant to be the last. Docking Bay 47, you're cleared for undocking sequence. The station controller said through the comm. Acknowledged, Daniel replied. Initiating undocking. The ship detached from the station with barely a tremor. Daniel guided it through the departure lane, following the standard protocols. Around him, dozens of other ships were doing the same thing. All anonymous. All just trying to get somewhere. His communicator chirped one final time. He almost ignored it, but something made him check that IT was from Sela. Safe travels, Daniel. And thank you for trusting us with your story. Attached was a forwarded message. It had come through official Galactic Historical Institute channels. A request from a human colony school on Terra Nova. They were developing a curriculum about Earth history and wanted to include testimony from actual survivors. Would he be willing to allow his sealed testimony to be used for educational purposes? Identity still protected. Daniel read it twice. Thought about children learning where humanity came from. Learning what had been lost. Learning that even in the worst moments, people had kept trying. That he thought about the 43 people in Bunker 772 who'd never gotten to tell their stories. About the billions who died when the missiles launched. About whether any of it meant anything if no one remembered. His finger hovered over the response screen. The ship cleared the station's gravity well, and Daniel aligned for the jump to hyperspace. The stars stretched into lines as the FTL drive engaged. For a moment, he existed in the space between stars, between past and future. Then normal space reasserted itself, and he was through, on course for the frontier colony. 3 days of quiet flying ahead. Time to think. That he pulled up the message again and typed a response. Just one word. Yes. He sent it before he could change his mind. The cargo run was uneventful. The mining colony received their equipment with minimal fuss. Daniel refueled, picked up a return cargo of processed ore, and headed back. This was his life now. Simple runs, simple work, no complications. But something had changed. He noticed it in small ways. The nightmares were less frequent. The tension in his shoulders had eased. When he passed through the jump points, he didn't think about the escape pod anymore. He just thought about where he was going. A week after delivering the mining equipment, he received another message. This one was from Robert, the young researcher from Terra Nova. Daniel, I hope it's okay that I'm contacting you directly. Celia gave me your ship's comm address. I wanted you to know that your interview helped me understand something I've been struggling with in my research. Survivors don't need to be fixed. They need to be seen. Thank you for letting us see you. Daniel saved the message, but didn't respond. Still, it stayed with him during the long hours of flying. His next cargo run took him near Proxima Colony. He hadn't been back in 9 years. On impulse, he requested permission to enter orbit, claiming a maintenance check. Permission granted. From orbit, he could see the settlements spread across the surface. Somewhere down, there was the salvage yard where he'd landed decades ago. Somewhere down, there was the apartment where he'd lived for 15 years, just another maintenance tech. He wondered if anyone remembered him. Probably not. He'd been good at being forgettable, but he remembered them. The supervisor who'd given him his first job without asking too many questions. The neighbors who'd invited him for dinner occasionally. The teacher at the technical college who'd helped him learn updated systems without wondering why his knowledge was so outdated. They'd helped him survive in a different way. They'd treated him like a person, not a tragedy. Maybe that's what healing was. Not forgetting the tragedy, but being allowed to be a person again. Daniel authorized the departure sequence and turned his ship toward the next job. A delivery to a medical station. Supplies for their trauma recovery wing. He smiled at the irony. Months passed. The cargo runs blurred together in a comfortable rhythm. But Daniel noticed changes. He started accepting communication requests from other pilots, sharing route information and trading tips. He stopped avoiding stations where he might be recognized. He even went to a pilot's bar once and had a conversation about nothing important with 3 other humans from different colonies that IT felt normal. It felt good. A year after leaving the station where his scars had been discovered, Daniel received a package at a way station. It was from Kessa. Inside was a small data chip and a handwritten note. These are letters from survivors we've helped using the protocols developed from your interview. They wanted you to know their stories. You don't have to read them, but if you wanted, they're here. You're not alone, Daniel. You never were. He kept the chip for 3 days before loading it. 37 letters from beings across a dozen species, all survivors of catastrophic events, all struggling to move forward, all finding ways to keep going. He read each one carefully. Some stories were worse than his. Some were different, but equally painful. All of them understood what it meant to be the one who lived when others didn't. That he saved them in a secure folder on his ship's computer. Didn't respond. Didn't know what to say. But knowing they existed helped. 2 years after his scars had been scanned, Daniel found himself back at the same station. Different cargo, different docking bay, but the same place where everything had changed. He had time between runs and wandered to observation deck 12. A Lorian child was at the window, watching ships. Different child, but the same wonder. Are you a pilot? She asked when she noticed him. Yes, Daniel said. Have been for a while now. Is it fun? Sometimes. Mostly it's just work. But good work. I want to be a pilot someday. Then study hard. And be patient with yourself. The good things take time. The child smiled and went back to watching ships. Daniel stood next to her for a while, comfortable in the silence. His communicator buzzed. New job posting. Long haul to the frontier territories. 3-month round trip. Good pay. Solo operation. That he accepted it immediately. That night, he pulled up the letters from Kessa's package and read through them again. Then he opened a blank message and began typing. My name is Daniel. I survived Earth's extinction. For a long time, I thought survival was enough. But I was wrong. We're meant to do more than survive. We're meant to live. And maybe, if we're lucky, we're meant to help others do the same. Thank you for sharing your stories with me. You're braver than you know. He attached it to a response to Kessa. Feel free to share this with anyone you think might need to read it. I'm done hiding. He sent it and felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Not happiness exactly, but something close. Purpose maybe, or peace. The cargo ship's systems powered up for departure. Daniel ran through the checklist one more time. Everything was ready. Course plotted. Cargo secured. Life support optimal. That he undocked from the station and turned toward the jump gate. Behind him, The station continued its endless rhythm of arrivals and departures. Ahead of him, the frontier territories waited. His scars still ached sometimes. The memories still hurt. But they were part of him now, not weights holding him back. Evidence of what he'd survived. Proof that even when everything ends, something can begin again. The jump drive engaged, and Daniel flew forward into whatever came next, no longer running from his past, but carrying it with him. Not as a burden, but as a story worth telling. The stars stretched into lines, and then he was through, alone in the quiet darkness between systems, exactly where he wanted to be.